May God bless your day. And may the week ahead be filled with grace, purpose, and profound peace for you.
Yes, absolutely.
And honestly, you might just need a double dose of that peace today. Because, well, today we are plunging headfirst into what happens when a single radical message just violently collides with the political and intellectual elites of the ancient world.
It's quite the collision, honestly.
It really is. We have a massive stack of historical and cultural source material for this deep dive, specifically looking at Acts chapter 17 and 18.
Right, some of the most dynamic chapters in the text.
Exactly. So we are tracking a single historical figure, the Apostle Paul, as he traverses 4 wildly different cities in the ancient Roman Empire. We're talking Thessalonica, Berea, Athens, and Corinth.
4 incredibly distinct cultural hubs.
Yeah, and the mission of this deep dive is to figure out the mechanics of how this one man adapted his message to audiences that could not have been more different from each other.
And, why his encounters are they're the ultimate blueprint for navigating opposition today.
For sure. Because it's not just history.
No, not at all. It is a sweeping historical narrative, but we are going to look under the hood of, first-century political mobs. We'll dissect the underlying philosophies of ancient intellectual elites and examine the gritty, survival mode economics of a commercial hub.
It's basically sociology, politics, and theology all mashed together.
Exactly. And by unpacking the socio-political climate of these cities, we actually uncover profound insights into how humans process new information, how established systems react to threats, and how we handle burnout when the opposition simply does not stop.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting with a situation that feels alarmingly modern. We begin in Thessalonica.
Right, a major, major city.
Yeah, so Paul arrives, goes to the local synagogue for 3 Sabbaths, and is highly successful. He wins over a lot of the Jewish audience and a massive number of prominent Greek women.
He's making waves very quickly.
Oh, record time. He is essentially disrupting the local social hierarchy, but the established religious leaders there, they don't challenge him to a theological debate. They are driven by pure envy.
Yeah, it's not an intellectual pushback at all.
No, they resort to a completely primal tactic.
Which is wild. The sources tell us they go into the marketplace and hire what the Greek text calls vadios.
Vadios. Okay, what exactly does that mean?
Well, these were essentially idle thugs, street brawlers or marketplace scoundrels.
Basically just looking for a fight.
Exactly. The strategy here is not to win an argument. It is purely to create chaos. The religious leaders use these instigators to whip up a mindless, violent mob. And they attack the house of a man named Jason, where Paul had been staying.
When you read the mechanics of how this mob forms, it is a perfect mirror for modern online outrage culture.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, you have a loud, unthinking crowd reacting entirely to rumors, and they're just whipped into a frenzy by a few strategic instigators who feel their personal influence is being threatened.
Yeah, they just unleash the trolls into the physical streets.
Exactly.
That structural parallel is undeniable. And the instigators are incredibly calculated in how they weaponize that outrage, too. Well, when they drag Jason before the city magistrates, they completely drop the religious grievance. They don't mention theology.
Oh, wow.
Right. Instead, they level a deeply political accusation. They claim, these men who have caused trouble all over the world have now come here, and they're all defying Caesar's decrees, saying that there is another king, one called Jesus.
So they pivot from a theological dispute to a charge of high treason against the Roman Empire.
Which is a masterstroke of legal manipulation, really.
Because the Romans didn't mess around with treason.
No, they did not. We have to remember the overarching political reality of the day, which was the Pax Romana, the Roman peace.
Right.
The Romans were actually highly tolerant of different local religions, provided those religions did not threaten public order or challenge the supreme authority of the emperor.
And claiming allegiance to our rival king.
That was a capital offense, automatically. The Jewish leaders knew the city magistrates wouldn't care about a debate over Jewish scripture, but the magistrates absolutely had to respond to a threat of sedition.
Or else Rome brings the hammer down on the entire city.
Exactly. It perfectly illustrates how, when a new idea threatens the established order, the pushback is rarely about the objective facts. It is entirely about preserving power.
That is so true. So Paul escapes this politically motivated mob by slipping away in the night.
He has to. It's too dangerous.
Yeah, and he travels down the road to a city called Berea, and this is a brilliant thematic shift in our material today, moving from mob violence to the pursuit of objective truth.
It's a breath of fresh air.
It really is,
Yeah.
because the people of Berea are described using a very specific Greek word, eugenes.
Right, eugenes. In classical Greek, it typically meant noble by birth, like aristocratic.
Like having a good pedigree.
Exactly.
Mm.
But the commentaries note that here, the author is using it to describe their character. The Bereans were noble in their open-mindedness and their fairness.
So they were the exact inverse of the Thessalonian mob.
Yes, they weren't ruled by prejudice, political anxiety, or just blind emotion.
But they also weren't just passively soaking up whatever Paul told them, which I think is key.
Oh, definitely.
The text says they received the message with eagerness, but then they examined the scriptures daily to see if what Paul said was actually true. I love the mechanics of this, by the way.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Because in the first century, you couldn't just pull out a smartphone to verify a quote.
Well, Google back then.
Right. They had to go to the synagogue, physically unroll massive, expensive parchment scrolls, and cross-reference Paul's claims line by line.
It was intensive labor.
Yeah, they were basically the original fact-checkers doing their own peer review instead of just taking the influencer's word for it.
That's a great way to put it. And it raises an important question about how we consume information today.
For sure.
The commentaries really hold the Bereans up as the ultimate model for anyone seeking truth because they balance two concepts that, frankly, often oppose each other: open-mindedness and deep skepticism.
Those usually don't go together.
They don't. But true faith or true intellectual pursuit, it's not blind acceptance. It requires the patience to suspend immediate judgment and the diligence to actually verify new claims against an established objective standard.
They had the intellectual humility to listen, coupled with the rigorous work ethic required to actually do the research.
Exactly.
The perfect antidote to the reactionary mob. But Paul's journey gets even more intense.
It always does.
Right. Those same political agitators from Thessalonica, they hear he's in Berea, and they travel there just to unleash the same chaos.
They just will not let it go.
So Paul is forced to flee again, this time entirely alone, to Athens. And here we transition from a grounded battle over objective truth to an arena where truth is entirely subjective.
Athens is just a whole different world.
The intellectual capital of the ancient world. But when Paul arrives, he isn't intimidated by the academic prestige. The sources say he is deeply provoked, like spiritually revolted, because the city is absolutely drowning in idols.
The visual of first-century Athens would have been staggering. I mean, a famous historical proverb from that era stated it was easier to find a god in Athens than a man.
Wow. Easier to find a god than a man.
Yeah. The commentary estimates there were roughly 3,000 idols scattered throughout the city.
3,000.
3,000. So for a man steeped in strict Jewish monotheism, walking through streets lined with statues of Hermes, Athena, Apollo, it would have been visually and spiritually suffocating for him.
So he starts debating in the agora, the central marketplace, and he immediately runs into the intellectual heavyweights, the Epicurean and Stoic philosopher.
It's academics of the day.
Right. And the sources say they dismissively call him a babbler. The Greek word is spermologos.
Spermologos, yes.
Which literally means a bird picking up random seeds. They are accusing him of just pecking at intellectual scraps, regurgitating borrowed thoughts without any real philosophical depth.
It's a huge insult.
But to really understand why they clash so hard, we need to understand what these two groups actually believed.
That is vital context. Let's look at the Epicureans first.
Okay.
Today, we associate the word Epicurean with someone who loves fine dining, right?
Yeah, like an Epicurean delight, foodies.
Exactly. But ancient Epicureanism was essentially a materialistic philosophy. They believed the universe was just random atoms colliding in a void.
Really? That sounds so modern.
It does. They didn't believe in an afterlife, and they believed that if the gods even existed, they were completely distant and indifferent to human affairs.
So they didn't care about us at all.
Right. Therefore, the highest goal of human life was to seek tranquility, avoid physical and mental pain, and just live a quiet life, free from the fear of divine judgment.
Wait, so if they think everything is just random atoms and the gods don't care, Paul preaching about a god who intervenes in history and raises the dead would sound completely absurd to them.
It would sound entirely unscientific to them. It made no sense.
Right.
And then you have the Stoics, who were on the complete opposite end of the spectrum.
Okay, what was their deal?
Well, the Stoics believed the universe was permeated by a divine, rational principle called the logos, To them, everything was strictly predetermined by fate.
Everything was fatalistic.
Everything. So the goal of a Stoic was to live in perfect harmony with nature by suppressing all passionate emotions, essentially achieving a state of apathy. You do your duty, you accept your fate, and you don't complain.
So between the two, you have the materialists who just want to avoid pain, and the fatalists who want to suppress all emotion.
Exactly.
And into this walks Paul, preaching about a passionate God who cares deeply about human choices. It's a complete ideological collision,
Oh, a massive crash.
which leads to the Areopagus or Mars Hill, basically the Supreme Council of Athens. They essentially demand to hear this new doctrine.
They want him to defend his thesis,
Yeah.
basically.
And the way Paul structures his speech here is mind-blowing. It's like a modern software developer realizing his audience doesn't run on a Jewish operating system, so he completely recodes his presentation into a Greek operating system so they can actually process the data.
That is a phenomenal way to describe it.
Thanks.
Because in the synagogues, Paul's rhetorical foundation was always the Old Testament prophets. But standing before the Epicureans and Stoics, he doesn't quote Jewish scripture once.
Not a single time.
Not once. Instead, he finds a cultural touchstone right in their own city. He tells them that as he was walking around, he noticed an altar with the inscription, "To the unknown God."
He totally leverages their own religious anxiety.
He really does.
They are so terrified of accidentally angering a deity they might have missed that they built a backup altar. And Paul basically says, let me introduce you to the God you just admitted you don't know.
He takes their abstract philosophical anxiety and grounds it in a concrete theological reality.
It's brilliant.
It is. From there, he dismantles their worldview using logic they are forced to respect. He asserts that the God who created the entire universe doesn't live in temples made by human hands.
Oh, and historically, it's highly likely he made that point while gesturing right up at the Parthenon, right? This massive architectural marvel looming over them on the Acropolis.
Yes, that's exactly the scene commentators picture.
He's using their own skyline to dwarf their theology.
Exactly. And then he tackles their deeply ingrained sense of racial superiority.
Oh, this part is huge.
Yeah, the Athenians were incredibly proud. They believed they were autochthonous, meaning they were literally born from the soil of Attica.
Like they sprouted from the dirt.
Right. They believed this made them fundamentally superior to all non-Greeks, whom they just called barbarians.
Okay, so how does Paul address that?
Paul attacks this directly, stating that God made all nations from one man, referencing Adam. He establishes the fundamental equality and shared brotherhood of all humanity, effectively tearing down systemic racism right there in the highest court of Athens.
Wow. And to anchor his points, he actually uses their own pop culture. He quotes pagan Greek poets.
Which is a brilliant rhetorical move.
He uses a line from Epimenides, "In him we live and move and have our being." And then he quotes the Stoic poet Aratus, "We are his offspring." But wait, isn't it incredibly risky for a biblical preacher to use pagan poetry to make his point? Like, doesn't that dilute his actual message?
What's fascinating here is the nuance of Paul's strategy. He wasn't giving a blanket endorsement of Stoicism or Greek mythology.
He wasn't saying they were right about everything.
No, not at all. He was building a cultural bridge. Paul recognized a fundamental principle. Truth, wherever it is found, belongs to God. By quoting their own respected thinkers, he was demonstrating that even within their flawed polytheistic system, there was a blind searching for the true creator.
So he took the common ground they already accepted and used it as a runway to launch them toward a completely new revelation.
Exactly. A runway toward revelation.
And the destination of that runway is a demand for accountability. He tells them God is no longer overlooking their ignorance and will judge the world through a man he raised from the dead.
And that is exactly where he loses the crowd.
Right. The moment he mentions a physical resurrection, they start mocking him. But if we think about what you said earlier regarding their philosophies, I think I see why.
Yeah, how so?
Well, if Greek philosophy viewed the physical material body as a prison that the immortal soul is desperately trying to escape at death, the idea of God shoving a soul back into a physical body forever, that must have sounded like a punishment, not a victory.
You've hit the nail on the head. It deeply offended their philosophical sensibilities. To the Greeks, salvation was escaping the material world. To Paul, salvation was the redemption and resurrection of the material world.
It was just a bridge too far for them.
It was a bridge too far for the Epicureans and Stoics. A few say they will listen again later, which, was the ancient equivalent of, we'll keep your resume on file.
Don't call us, we'll call you.
Right. only a handful of people actually believe.
Yeah.
So compared to the massive influence he built in Thessalonica and Berea, Athens ends up being an intellectual stalemate.
Which brings us to the final stop on this journey, and here's where it gets really interesting.
It certainly shifts gears.
Yeah, because after the ivory tower of Athens, Paul doesn't go to another academic center. He travels to Corinth. We are shifting from high-minded philosophy to a gritty survival mode commercial reality.
Corinth was a totally different beast.
Completely.
It was a bustling, immensely wealthy two-port city. It was the commercial hub of the ancient Mediterranean, incredibly diverse and notoriously immoral.
So if Athens was a university town,
Corinth was Las Vegas crossed with Wall Street.
Las Vegas crossed with Wall Street. Wow, and you can just feel the psychological toll this journey has taken on Paul.
Oh, without a doubt.
In one of his later letters to the Corinthians, he actually admits that he arrived in their city in weakness and fear and with much trembling. The man is dealing with profound burnout.
He is exhausted.
He's been chased by mobs, smuggled out of cities, laughed at by intellectuals, and now he is completely alone in this cutthroat metropolis. So what does he do? He gets a blue-collar job.
He does. He connects with a Jewish couple, Aquila and Priscilla, who have a fascinating backstory of their own.
Yeah, they were refugees, right?
Yes. In 49 AD, the Roman Emperor Claudius issued a decree expelling all Jews from Rome due to civil unrest. So Aquila and Priscilla had their lives uprooted, lost their home, and ended up trying to rebuild in Corinth.
And Paul shares a trade with them. They are tent makers.
Tent makers, exactly.
And we have to be clear about what first-century tent making involved. They weren't just pitching canvas camping tents.
No, it was not light work.
The sources note they worked with silicium, which was a heavy fabric woven from goat hair, or they worked with thick leather.
It was brutal physical labor and involved cutting tough leather, using heavy awls to punch holes, pulling thick threads that would leave your hands blistered and bleeding.
And it smelled terrible, I imagine.
Awful. It was exhausting, dawn to dusk work.
See, it completely humanizes him. We often elevate historical figures onto pedestals, but here is Paul working a grueling, full-time manual labor side hustle just to survive.
Just to pay for his daily bread.
Right. He is dealing with severe burnout, cutting leather all day, and then trying to muster the energy to preach in the synagogue on the Sabbath. And he specifically refused to take money from the Corinthians because he knew their culture was entirely transactional.
That's a crucial point. He didn't want anyone accusing him of being just another religious huckster trying to get rich off a new philosophy.
His integrity had to be bulletproof in a city where literally everything had a price tag.
Exactly.
But even with that dedication, the opposition flares up again.
Of course it does.
When his companions finally arrive with financial support from other cities, Paul shifts to full-time preaching, and the leaders in the Corinthian synagogue vehemently oppose him. The Greek text actually indicates an organized, abusive resistance.
And Paul finally hits his human limit.
He really does. He executes this incredibly dramatic, almost petty gesture. He literally shakes the dust and dirt out of his clothes at them and says, "Your blood be on your own heads. I am clean. From now on, I will go to the Gentiles."
It's a very vivid image.
And then, in a move of pure defiance, he relocates his entire operation right next door. He starts preaching in the house of a man named Titius Justus, whose house literally shares a wall with the synagogue.
It is an incredibly bold, confrontational move.
It's so petty, but I love it.
And structurally, it pays off. Crispus, the actual leader of the synagogue, leaves and converts, along with his whole household.
Which is huge.
It is. But the psychological pressure on Paul doesn't just vanish with that success. The looming threat of another Thessalonian-style mob is crushing him.
Which is exactly when he receives a vision in the night. The Lord speaks to him, "Do not be afraid. Keep on speaking. Do not be silent, for I am with you, and no one is going to attack and harm you, because I have many people in this city."
If we connect this to the bigger picture, particularly for you, the listener, dealing with your own periods of exhaustion, this moment is incredibly profound.
Yeah.
Notice the mechanics of the vision. It doesn't promise that the opposition will disappear. It doesn't magically transport him to a safer, easier city.
Right, he still has to stay in Corinth.
Exactly. The promise is simply presence. I am with you. It's the assurance that the work matters and he is not alone. Sometimes the absolute bravest thing a person can do when facing intense opposition and severe burnout is to simply stay put and continue doing the quiet, unglamorous work.
And that's exactly what he does. He stays in Corinth for 18 months, and the vision holds true. Eventually, the angry mob does rise up, and they drag Paul into court before the Roman proconsul, Gallio.
But Gallio's reaction is the exact opposite of the magistrates in Thessalonica.
Totally different.
Gallio, who, as a fascinating historical side note, was the older brother of the famous Stoic philosopher Seneca. He looks at this mob, listens to the accusation, and completely throws the case out.
He just tosses it.
Yeah, he views it as an internal squabble over Jewish terminology and refuses to let Roman law be weaponized for a religious dispute. He literally drives them out of the court.
Wow.
It sets a massive legal precedent, showing Rome's early absolute indifference toward this new movement, which provided a protective window for it to spread across the empire.
So what does this all mean? We've tracked an incredible journey through 4 totally distinct environments today.
4 very different case studies.
Right. In Thessalonica, we saw the raw, terrifying power of a political mob weaponizing outrage against a threat to their social order. In Berea, we saw the ultimate defense mechanism, rigorous, objective fact-checking.
Essential skills.
For sure. In Athens, we watched a masterclass in engaging with intellectual elitism, recoding a message to build cultural bridges while challenging deeply held assumptions. And in the gritty commercial streets of Corinth, we saw the heavy reality of burnout, the dignity of manual labor, and the quiet courage required to simply stay the course.
The overarching takeaway across all these sources is that powerful, truthful ideas possess the inherent ability to disrupt any system they touch.
Any system at all.
Whether that system is a volatile political structure, a proud intellectual establishment, or a corrupt commercial empire, truth is never neutral. It always demands a response.
It demands a response from us today, too. And that leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to mull over as you navigate your week. Think back to that altar in Athens, the one dedicated to the unknown God.
Right.
Paul recognized that even in their incredibly sophisticated, hyper-educated culture, there was a gaping blind spot and anxiety they were throwing sacrifices at without understanding why. So look around our world today. What is the unknown God in our modern society?
That's the real question.
What are the concepts, the technologies, or the cultural anxieties that we blindly worship or sacrifice our time to without truly understanding them? What altars are we building in our own modern public squares?
That is a brilliant lens through which to view our own culture. It really is.
It really forces you to examine the systems you interact with every single day. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. As we wrap up, we want to explicitly state that God blesses all of you, our listeners. Until next time, keep examining the sources, keep asking the hard questions, and keep seeking the truth.